In today's tutorial we're going to make this twisting logo reveal. Tinfoil background is optional. So as usual we're going to start by bringing a fusion comp onto our timeline. So go to the top, effects library, open your effects library, come to effect, grab your fusion comp and drag it onto the timeline. For this tutorial I'm going to change the length of the clip to 10 seconds. Once we've done that we can jump into Fusion. Okay, drag your playhead to frame 0 and move your media out of the way so we've got some room. First thing we're going to need for this is a cube. Now ordinarily we would take our shape 3D and just make it into a cube. However, for this particular tutorial it's not going to work because we need to map textures onto each face. So if we delete that, press Shift Space Bar and type cube and bring in cube 3D. Now what you'll notice is that this has many more inputs. Each of these inputs along the top and the bottom are for a different face of the cube. We're going to be adding the same material to 5 of these faces and then our logo to the 6th. So here's our cube. As you can see it's got lots of pretty colours on it, each representing a different face. So we will eventually slice this, but first we need to reduce its size. So if you unlock X, Y and Z scale, and what we're going to do is reduce the Y scale to an 1/8 or 0.125. Our rotating cube will eventually have 8 layers. So first we are going to start the animation process. So bring your playhead back to frame 0, keyframe the Y rotation, come forward to frame 60 and type a value of 90. This is the basis of our sort of layer spins. So once we have the first layer sorted, we're going to Shift Spacebar and type duplicate. We're looking for the duplicate 3D node. We'll drag that into the viewer. At the minute nothing changes. If we come to the number and type 8, and now we need to spread them out to make our cube, and that's going to be our Y offset, which again we're going to set to a value of 0.125. This reforms our original cube, but it's now made up of slices. If we look at it at the moment, all the slices rotate at the same time, so we just see a spinning cube. Next we're going to offset that. So if you come to the time offset and type a value of whatever you want really, -5 is what I went for. Go for minus numbers or it all goes wrong at the end of the animation if you use positive numbers. So with -5 we get the fanning out that we were looking for. Next we're going to map materials onto the faces of the cube, so Shift Spacebar and bring in a blend node. To this we're going to attach a background that you can make any colour you want. I chose white. So right click the output from the background onto the blend and you're looking for diffused colour material. Now take the output from your blend again with your right click and add it to each of the faces except the left face. Leave that one blank. Cool. So we now have a cube with 5 of its 6 faces white and 1 face still purple. That's the face that we're going to put our logo on to start with. To get our logo, I'm going to use the loader node. Shift spacebar and loader. Navigate to wherever your logo is. At this point I actually accidentally had the background selected, so it's merged, so I'll just delete the merge, move the loader to where I want it. Now if we look at my logo, you'll see that there's transparency around the edges. We can't have transparency because that messes up the projection, so it needs to be merged onto a background. Again, you can have this background any colour you want. I went for a sort of fairly pale grey, just enough so that I could get the white band around my logo visible. If your coloured logo doesn't have white, then you can use white as your background to match up with the other faces. So once we have this, we need to merge it as a material onto our cube. So again, we need a blend node, and then from the blend node, pipe onto the left face of your cube. If we now spin the cube round, you can see it's appeared on the bottom slice. I think this is to do with the offset of the duplicate node. As the animation carries on, it appears on all the others. What we're aiming for is one logo covering the whole 8 slices. To do that, we need a UV map. With your UV map selected, go to map mode and change it to camera. We now need to bring in a camera 3D node. Rename this projection or projector so that you know what's happening. Again, right click the output onto your UV map and select camera input and put your duplicate into the scene input. Now at the minute we're still looking at the duplicate node rather than the UV map. This is the camera. If we put the UV map now into our view, you can see we've got a tiny little logo down the bottom. So what we need to do is reposition our camera or our projector. To do that, I check use target. We need to get this to the midpoint of the cube, which is 5.5 minus 0.0625. We'll put it in the middle. We can then copy this value to the camera's Y translation, and we now have our logo in the middle of our face. If you notice at this point we're working around frame 110, which is where the animation has ended. So we can pull our camera back to get a bigger logo. The other way of doing it is if you come into the camera itself, into the first tab, and just change the angle of view, and you can make it larger. So once we have our logo the size we want it, if you bring your playhead back to 0, it's disappeared, and that's because it's now round on the left hand side of the cube. And if we play our animation through, our logo starts to get revealed. However, this isn't the effect we want. At the minute, the logo is staying static, and we want the logo to spin round with the cube as it comes round. So to do that, come back to your UV map and check lock UV on animated objects. Now you can see this makes our logo look funky, so if you just adjust the reference time slider until you get your logo back, and we are now ready to rock and roll. As you can see, each part of the logo sticks to its relevant slice and the logo appears as the animation progresses. So that's basically our sliced animated cube. So what I'm going to do now is just tidy all this up and move it off to the side so that we can add it into a 3D scene. So we're going to bring in a 3D merge, a renderer, a camera and a spotlight. We will pipe the output from our UV map into the merge, pipe in the camera, pipe in the spotlight, and then pipe the merge into the render 3D so that we can now have a 2D output. So the first thing we need to do is position our camera. As we start to pull the camera back, you'll see our cubes start to appear. So again, we're going to use target. We're going to paste back in the same values that we were using earlier for the center. So 0.4375, both for the target Y and the camera Y, so that the camera is now facing the middle of the cube. We can use the Z translation to pull the camera back and adjust it to get the cube to be roughly the size that we want. What I also did here was I moved the camera off to the side and up slightly, just to get what I think is a better view of the cube. So I pulled it to the side and up just so that you see in the edges of the cube. And if we just play that through, you can see what will appear, or something similar to what will appear in the final output. So once we're happy with the animation, the next step is to add some lighting. To do that, if you go into your render 3D node and activate lighting and shadows, you can see your output goes dark. This is because our spotlight's currently not shining on our cube. Again, we're going to use the same center values, 0.4375 for the target and the spotlight's Y translation. Now we can again pull it back along the Z axis and it starts to light our scene. Again, from that basic position you can drag your light around to your taste. And you start to get a sense of what the finished product's going to look like. So I'm not mad happy with the delay on the spin, so I'm going to change it to -10. The knock-on effect of this is it's going to mess up the logo. So what we need to do is again come back into our UV map and adjust the reference time slider. So with the bigger delay you get a more noticeable sort of slicing, I suppose, but it does take longer for the whole animation to finish. The next thing I'm going to do is add an ending animation, and to do this I want the cube to spin off to the other side. So come about a second from the end of your clip, add a keyframe, come to the end of your clip and increase the Y rotation to 180. Now as you see, this doesn't give you a completed animation. That's because the various delays mean that the animation goes beyond the 1 second mark. So open your keyframe editor, select your last 2 keyframes, and with your playhead on the last frame just drag the keyframes until the animation completes. And then you can close down your keyframe again. Now you can try proxies and things, but I find the quickest way to preview this is to come back into the edit screen and let the animation cache. This for me took about 5 minutes, but I think in the long run it's quicker than having the animation chug through in Fusion. Once your animation is cached, you can play it through in real time and you can see what's happening. Okay, going back into Fusion and continuing to work on our 3D scene. The next thing I did was just add a wall. So I've taken a shape 3D node, it's set to plane, and that's all we need. Take the size and just size it up so that it fills your view. Now as you can see, the light doesn't fill the whole back wall and the wall itself is too far back. So with your shape 3D selected, come into the transform tab and bring Z translation up to where you want it. You can then come into your spotlight and tinker with that to get the right amount of light in. You can tone down the intensity. And the other thing I did was I increased the shadow map size just to make the edge shadows a bit sharper. Going into your shape 3D, your plane, you can go into the specular tab and bring the sort of shininess, if you like, of your background plane down. So popping back into the edit tab just so that we can get a look at it. I'm not mad keen on this really bright corner here, so I'm going to go into the blin for our cube and I'm going to drop the specularity for that as well. Again, these are all going to be dependent on where your lights are, how it's affecting the scene, as to what changes you need to make. So now back in the edit tab you can see it looks, to my mind, much better. Okay, the last bit is just a bit of a whim on my part. It's the sort of tinfoil background. So I brought in another blend node. I'm going to use a loader to find a normal map, which are these funky pink and purple map things that are basically bump maps. You need to put the loader through a bump map node and pipe the bump map into the bump map material of the blin, and put the blin into the material of your shape 3D. And you can see a vague outline of the map there, but if you come back to the bump map and change the source image type to bump map, you get a much more dramatic effect. The tinfoil background, as I called it earlier. Again, in the blin for your shape 3D, you can change the specularity to tone it down a little bit. What I also did was added in a second spotlight, and this was just to put a bit of colour on it really. So again, using target with the same values as previously, and translation on Y to keep everything sort of centered. Pull your spotlight out on the Z axis and you see that it blows out everything completely, but we'll sort that in a second. So I dragged it to the side and dropped it down a bit. In the first tab of your spotlight, I actually added a colour to this one of orange. Now, I don't want the scene to be orange, I want there to be a sense of colour rather than a massive amount of colour, so drop that intensity right down. So it's just giving a hint of the colour. And that is pretty much it. Again, if we come back into the edit tab, let the Fusion composition cache, which again took 5 or so minutes. And there, as they say, you have it. One logo revealed on a sliced cube with a tinfoil background. I hope you found it useful or entertaining, or both. Please like, subscribe and hit the notification bell, and I'll catch you on the next one.